PM, despite their shared experiences of both being working mothers in public service roles under immense scrutiny. With all they seemingly had in common, what made their relationship uncomfortable at best and hostile at worst, and what led to them locking horns over an area closest to Elizabeth's heart. I'm Anita Rani, and this is Beneath the Crown. Margaret Thatcher and the Queen should have been a match made in heaven after all. Thatcher was raised a firm monarchist by her father Alfred, and nobody would curtsy lower to the Queen than her out of respect. Could the frost between them stem from a culture clash between someone born into privilege and someone from a self-made background? That would be at odds with the very relaxed and friendly relationship the Queen enjoyed with Labour Prime Minister Harold Wilson, who, like Thatcher, was also from a lower middle-class background. Instead, a series of incidents brought their political, philosophical and social viewpoints into conflict. Royal feathers were ruffled soon after Thatcher became Prime Minister, when she discovered that the Queen's former art advisor and palace employee, Sir Anthony Blunt, had been a Soviet spy. His confession had been kept secret by the establishment for many years. Thatcher thought the cover-up was unacceptable and publicly exposed Blunt in November 1979. Blunt soon issued a statement to the media and was stripped of his knighthood by the Queen.
I was persuaded by Guy Burgess that I could best serve the cause of anti-fascism by joining him in his work for the Russians. This was a case of political conscience against loyalty to country. I chose conscience.
The Falklands War in 1982 was controversial for many reasons, but initially it appeared to bring Prime Minister and Queen closer together, for there was pride to be gained from successfully protecting sovereign territory. But it was a territorial issue that reportedly caused a rift soon after the war was won. At any post-war victory parade, the custom would be for the monarch to receive a salute, much like George VI had in 1946. This was an impossibility for the Falklands Victory Parade in October 1982. Thatcher scheduled it 5 months after the war at a time when the Queen and Prince Philip were on tour in Australia, and to make matters worse, when the Lord Mayor was due to receive the salute in place of the Queen. Thatcher failed to do what Winston Churchill did in 1946 and move well away from the person receiving the salute to make it clear who it was intended for. Thatcher invaded an area reserved for the sovereign. She felt it was her war, not Elizabeth's, and rightly or wrongly, she should receive the recognition. There were to be other moments where Thatcher seemingly took over the monarch's traditional role, albeit with matters of tragedy, not celebration. Thatcher was first on the scene ahead of the Queen at the Herald of Free Enterprise ferry sinking in Zeebrugge, Belgium in 1987, and for the Pan Am Flight 103 bombing over Lockerbie, Scotland. The American invasion of Grenada in 1983 created more conflict. American President Ronald Reagan's intent was to overthrow the communist regime on the island, but the island was, and still is, a member of the Commonwealth, with Elizabeth as their queen. And she was unhappy that Thatcher, who had a very warm relationship with Reagan, posed no objection to this military act, even though she only found out after it had begun. Reagan even called up Thatcher to apologise.
We think the military part of it is going to end very shortly.
Well, that would be very, very good news.
Yeah.
And then if we return to democracy, that would be long.
Well, but as I say, I'm sorry for any embarrassment we caused you, but please understand it was just our fear of our own weakness over here with regard to secrecy.
The Queen felt betrayed by Thatcher's refusal to condemn the invasion. It's rumoured that she even postponed her next scheduled audience with the Prime Minister, and then during their next encounter did not invite her to sit down as usual. By the time Thatcher came into power, long gone were the days when royal scandals were ignored by the British press, quick to protect the monarchy. They were now fair game, especially to media mogul Rupert Murdoch, owner of The Sun and the News of the World. He enjoyed a very cosy relationship with Thatcher. Some may call it an arrangement. In return for Thatcher allowing Murdoch to have control over the country's media, his papers gave her crucial support in every election. Thatcher's closeness with him was a source of annoyance for the Queen, who felt her family were under constant attack by his tabloids. While there had been several cracks over the first few years of her premiership, a great gulf was to appear in 1985. The two ladies had very different views on the Commonwealth. To Elizabeth, it was like a family, the legacy of her beloved father, King George VI.
That is the great privilege belonging to our place in the worldwide Commonwealth, that there are homes ready to welcome us in every continent of the earth. Before I am much older, I hope I shall come to know many of them.
Elizabeth is the glue that binds the Commonwealth together, and at conferences she would hold one-on-one audiences with all the heads of state. To Thatcher, however, the Commonwealth was an unnecessary hangover from the empire that gave no benefit to her nation and gave funds to countries with dictatorships she wanted no association with. This huge difference of views came to a head in October 1985 at the Nassau Commonwealth Conference. The key matter on the table was whether to impose economic sanctions on South Africa as a means of forcing the abolition of apartheid, with no other viable alternatives. Elizabeth was in favour of making a stand and backing sanctions, as were all the Commonwealth leaders, apart from one. Margaret Thatcher was against them. While she claimed she was opposed to an apartheid government, cutting off the money generated by exports to South Africa would cause a significant financial hit and look bad for her budget. Now, this put Elizabeth in a very awkward position. She was upset that her Prime Minister's stance was causing disunity in the Commonwealth, and she was desperate to keep her family of nations together at all costs. While Elizabeth's stance in domestic affairs would be to not declare a position, the rules of non-intervention that bound her as a monarch did not apply to her role as head of the Commonwealth. The issue rumbled on as Thatcher refused to buckle to pressure and agree to sanctions. An uneasy compromise was eventually agreed with the wording. Thatcher saw it as a victory.
But the question is, did one person move to the 48, or did 48 move to 1?
The following year, the relationship between Thatcher and the Queen deteriorated even further.
And if it were to become public knowledge that there had been an unprecedented rift between Sovereign and Prime Minister, would that really be so bad?
In July 1986, the Today and Sunday Times newspapers dropped a bombshell. The articles contained leaks from Buckingham Palace, in which the Queen's concerns about Thatcher were reported. They branded the Prime Minister as confrontational, divisive and uncaring towards the less privileged in society. The stories were publicly denied by both sides. While Margaret Thatcher was in power, the nation had two mothers jostling for the same role, whether that be reaping the rewards of national glory or extending compassion at times of disaster. Their outlooks could not have been more different at times. It was their opinions on how others should be treated that caused the greatest divide. The attitudes and beliefs that each of them held so dear was simply not compatible.
I don't want people's pity, or charity, or compassion. Nothing would insult me more. No one would remember the Good Samaritan if he only had good intentions.